and fall. Do not trip and fall. Najakian. Welcome. Okay. Yeah, that's an echo. All right. So what am I doing here? All right. Oh. Oh. Let's see. 52. Thank you. Roll. Let's see here. Paste.
All right, man. You got just under 2 minutes.
Dubabe. Scooby-Dooby. All right. Hey, Redcap. What are you doing, Bubba? I know that tune. And you too, Logan. Logan. We have a new subscriber, Najakian. Also, a new subscriber from a few days ago, John Timlick. Joseph Paul said, great job as always. You're certainly welcome there, Joseph. Thanks very much for listening. I appreciate all y'all. Let's see what else is going on. 1 flipping minute. Oh. That was a fast hour. Jeez. Jeez, Louise B's knees, trees, fleas. Welcome, you viewers. What are the show plans for the holidays? Actually, we're not going to be off much. IT Field Services, you're welcome. Merry Christmas. Let's see here. What was I going to say? I was going to say something.
All right, back in 10 seconds.
10.
And that's not in this bill. I asked Sarah Huckabee Sanders about that.
Okay. North to south, coast to coast. This is the Wells Report. How are you? I just put the television show up. It's available to you on YouTube Live Events. It's also a Google Hangout. The Philip Brown, executive producer of the Wells Report. Have you been able to find the Wells Report on a Google Hangout? No? I mean, most of the time people just go to Facebook because it's easier. You know, I put up a couple of links. One on the, I actually, courtesy of Jube Dankworth. Jube, I'm going to call you. I swear I'm going to call you, Jube. Anyway, because of Jube Dankworth, I now have a fan page, which means that anybody can reach out to the Wells Report anytime they want to. And thank you, Jube. That was a wonderful Christmas present. I've got to get back in touch with her because there's so much more I have to do. I need to learn this thing. I don't get this platform. Anyway, so you can get the Wells Report on a video stream that goes on. It's going on right this very moment. And you can get it on Facebook by going to my Facebook page. And it's right there. There's a little thing. But you can also go to YouTube. What I have not been able to figure out is how to go to Google Hangouts, because I've sort of gotten there. Let's see, Hangouts. OUTS. If I just type in Hangouts, Google Hangouts, and then click on Google Hangouts, and then messaging, voice, and video calls. Then I hit the arrow, message, start a group friend, or connect anytime. It's sort of like Skype. Okay. Get started by calling or messaging a friend below. Okay, so I'm in a video call. I was in a video call. I'm in a video call. It's empty hangout. Okay, so no. No, I guess the hangout is empty, but I am doing a call. Yeah, that's what's going on. So the Google Hangout is empty. So I suppose if you go to Google Hangouts, you might be able to punch yourself in somehow. So there. That's the best I can do for you. See what else is going on. Let's see. All right, nothing on Twitter that I can talk about. Let's see. Oh, Logan says that he's on Google Hangouts. It's video or chat. Scott Body says, hey, saw you on Twitter. What app can you get for iPhone? What app can you get for iPhone? Oh, we are on, Scott, we're on TuneIn, TUNEIN. That's the app. And then look for KBDT and you will find us. So there you go. All right, let's get busy. Back to the show now, after we go through all of the highfalutin, high-tech stuff that makes it possible for you to watch a radio show. I know, it's like golf. It's like golf play-by-play on the radio. There's just something weird about it. I'm just saying. By the way, if you do plug into the video cast today, you will notice that I'm much more beautiful on the radio than I am on video. So, you know. President Trump did something amazing. I guess it was yesterday. I don't know exactly how it happened, but the president of the United States was able to come up with a major policy speech on national security, and hardly anybody paid any attention to it. We were looking for coverage of it, but the speech was over and done with an hour before we were on the air. And so what we ended up doing was we were looking for coverage of it, couldn't find scant coverage. We figured it was going to be on today. Strangely enough, not a whole bunch of coverage for it today either. But it's a huge speech. I mean, is this the new mainstream media strategy? What we're going to do now is we're just going to ignore the president, pretend he doesn't actually exist, cover the Congress and the Senate, just leave the president to twist in the wind. Is that the latest thing? Anyway, we will cover the president because we are here. President Donald Trump put out an America First strategy detailed in his speech, talking about China and Russia, countries the president described as rival powers to the U.S. But despite his stated goal of building a great partnership with them, both countries seem to be less enthusiastic about the plan, based on their reactions to it. Xinhua North America, that's the Chinese news agency. U.S. President Trump announced the national security strategy, the first of its kind since he took office in January, the 17th since the former Reagan administration began to submit the reports to U.S. Congress in 1987. A document outlining the plan accuses Russia of using subversive measures to weaken America's credibility and European governments, specifically calling out Moscow for, quote, its invasions of Georgia and Ukraine. The document does not specifically mention Russian meddling in last year's U.S. presidential election, but it does warn Russia and China that are more effectively using Russia and China are more effectively using cyber attacks and online propaganda, saying U.S. allies must counter misinformation. Dmitry Peskov, a spokesman for the Russian President Vladimir Putin, told reporters today the mention of Russia struck Moscow as imperial and showed an aversion to a multipolar world. Multipolar world. Multipolar. Peskov, however, said Moscow was encouraged by calls to cooperate with Russia in areas that could be beneficial for the U.S. H.R. McMaster, the U.S. National Security Advisor, told the BBC after Trump's speech that Russia has used propaganda and disinformation against the world's democracies, describing the meddling as certainly a threat to U.S. national security. McMaster said Russia was engaged in supporting groups on both the left and right of the political spectrum, with its goal of creating tension between the groups to undermine democracy. You know, sort of like the Democrat Party. Chinese dominance risks diminishing sovereignty in many states, its regions, and beyond. The strategy calls for stronger traditional alliances and new partnerships in Asia amid a geopolitical competition between free and repressive visions of the world order. That's a good statement. One new policy proposed restricting visas to prevent intellectual property theft by foreigners, particularly the Chinese, who travel to the U.S. to study science, engineering, math, and technology. They're very, very, very good at stealing American technology. So far, they've gotten the Delta booster. They've gotten the W-88 warhead. They've gotten all of the nation's computer modeling capability with regard to nuclear weapons. In other words, you don't have to actually construct a nuclear weapon to be able to model one accurately on a supercomputer. And what ended up happening is that some guy from Caltech was able to get all of those models. That, by the way, is a huge advantage. Just to give you an idea, if North Korea had access to these programs, they would be able to develop from beginning to end a functioning nuclear weapon in the cyber world that would function as advertised in the real world. They'd be able to do it in a building that would essentially be off the grid. Some nondescript building with a couple of, these are ancient technologies now, but Cray YMPs would be able to run these programs. And we're talking about the construction of the weapon, everything. Construction, predicted performance, everything. And we would not know that a rocket leaving the North Korean peninsula or the north part of the Korean peninsula was carrying a nuclear weapon until we shot it down and there was a big nuclear boom. Or, failing that, you would be able to notice that there were droplets of radioactive material falling all around you. So we wouldn't know that that was the case until it was just about all over. It gets even more scary when you start thinking about living in Tokyo or Seoul or any of those other places that are easily within reach of North Korea. So these programs that they stole were very important. You know, to me, I would charge them for all that. I mean, as soon as we realized and built a case for the Chinese stealing the W-88 warhead, I would say, you know what? That's worth about half of what we owe you. And that's what I would do. I would just charge them half. I'd go to the World Court, The Hague, those idiots in those red judges' robes that they wear. I'd have those guys find China guilty of stealing all that stuff, and then I'd give them, I don't know. We owe them $13 trillion, something along that vicinity. Give them 0.1% of it, which would be $1.3 billion, I think. It's more money than the Hague has ever seen in one place at one time. That's what I'd do. That's what I would have done. And I don't know why in heck. No, you didn't. JC Fab, who was on this chat room right here, he said, hey, I built circuit boards for the Cray YMP. Really? That's amazing. See, I have brains listening to this broadcast. So anyway, here's what's going on. Trump's stance probably means U.S.-Chinese economic and trade relations will be under a little bit more pressure, but I don't think that's bad. Trump's security statement marked a revival of the anti-China rhetoric he used in the 2016 presidential campaign. The remarks also signal that Trump may be relying on more U.S. Trade Representative Rod Leitzinger, known as an economic nationalist, than on globalists such as Gary Cohn, head of the White House Economic Council, the White House National Economic Council. China's Global Times newspaper, published by the ruling Communist Party, said Trump's report reflects Washington's reluctance to accept the reality of China's rise. It's not so much the reality of China's rise. It's not even the cheating that China had to do to be able to rise the way it did. That's not the issue. The issue is that if you're going to be a superpower, you need to act like one. And superpowers pay their patents off. They pay copyright fees. Superpowers act benevolently. That's what they do. I happen to think that if indeed the United States, Russia, and China would quit screwing around with each other and actually work together to try to build a better world, we would have one. And all they'd have to do really is to just look out after their interests. According to Ann Gearan and Steve Muffson, I'll wait until after the break. The security strategy of principled realism, setting the stage for global competition, which indeed is the right thing to do. We'll get to some of that too. Give you a basic little thumbnail sketch of President Trump's national security strategy. If you have anything that you'd like to add to it, call us. 844-927-6691, 844-927-6691. Do you feel better now, by the way, that our national security strategy no longer includes being attacked by clouds? That really made me feel a lot better. It did. Will the U.S. be... Now, and this is something else I want to ask you about. Do you think the U.S. will be involved in a war in the next year? If so, where do you think it's going to happen? Thinking about this national security thing the president came up with yesterday. Are we going to be in a war next year? Call us.
All right, sir. You can get about 3.5.
Thank you. That's really cool, man. JCP or JCF, JC Fab. That's really cool, man. I cannot imagine. I got my hands on a real disk drive. It was an IBM commercial quality disk drive, and it was such a difference from the consumer grade ones. It was truly amazing. And I got to be honest with you, it was like, I can't imagine what the real stuff would look like. Yeah, attacked by clouds. Climate change. Yeah, the number one thing President Obama said the number one national security threat to the United States was global warming. He actually said that. He meant it. He was honestly. Hang on a minute. Back in a minute. me, did you see the one that I did?
All right, man. Back in 30 seconds.
That was part of that. I wanted it to look somewhat familiar. I wanted it to look somewhat familiar. You know? And for Texas, you can't really, I mean, that's close. I'm back.
All right, you got 10 seconds.
Got 10 seconds. You are listening to the Wells Report. President Trump set out a national security strategy of principled realism and global competition. Global competition is the crucible of excellence. And you don't have to be a superpower to compete. You don't. You can compete at a level that is completely perfect for your country if you just choose to. But what competition does is it forces you to use your national assets, specifically your people. And using your people is the big success. That's the secret of America. Is that if you do something in America that's truly amazing, and it can be as simple as coming up with a communications platform called Facebook. You can be rich beyond your wildest dreams. For many years, our citizens watched as Washington politicians presided over one disappointment after another. Too many of our leaders, so many, forgot those voices they were to respect and whose interests they were supposed to defend. That was us. Trump said that Ronald Reagan building an international trade center in Washington before an audience that included cabinet secretaries, government workers, and uniformed members of the country, or the military, rather. The national security strategy... The national security strategy, a congressionally mandated mission statement, is supposed to guide an administration's priorities for global engagement, economic bargaining, and demonstrations of military strength. That's what's going on. Now, there are 5 things, according to CNN, and this is where you have to start, well, I don't know exactly what they're talking about here. I don't know. There are 5 things to know about the national security strategy, according to CNN. What they've said is the Trump administration's national security strategy focuses heavily on U.S. economic relationships with other countries, arguing the U.S.'s economic security is fundamental to national security. It is. The document makes clear that America First is more than a campaign slogan. It's a guiding force in U.S. foreign policy. Trump's strategy draws attention to the U.S. trade imbalances with other countries and warns of economic aggression from other countries like China as key national security concerns. Look, here's the situation. It is ridiculous that the United States continues to finance other countries around the world by virtue of the fact that we run these amazing trade deficits. It's silly. I know that it works from a standpoint of, the rich relatives around the corner being able to buy you stuff for Christmas. I get it. But the American people would really like to be able to share in some of the prosperity that we've been exporting to other countries, courtesy of these trade imbalances. And it's something that's got to stop. And does it make that much difference? I mean, is it okay to have the same amount of money going to Mexico that comes back from Mexico? Is it so bad that we wouldn't be able to say, for example, have as much Chinese economic might coming towards us as we send towards them? Now, granted, 20 years ago, you had a real problem with China. The problem is this was a superpower that was falling on its butt with nuclear weapons and 1 billion people to feed. That's why the United States and the rest of the world pretty much ignored the fact that China simply was not paying its patents or copyright fees or any kind of allowance, royalties, what have you, for anybody else's intellectual property. Because they had 1 billion people to feed. 1 billion people starving to death in a government that doesn't have a lot of cards to play, but does have nuclear weapons. Bad combination. But that's not the case now. In fact, China decided to allow the yuan to float against the world currencies. That was a huge step. I didn't think they were going to be able to afford it for another 10 years. And I may be right, as it turns out. I don't know exactly yet, but the jury's still out on that one. They may have rushed it. But that's okay. That's okay. Telephone number, 844-927-6691. You feel better now that the national security strategy doesn't mention climate change? Yeah, we're not going to get attacked by a cloud. That makes me feel much happier. I'm telling you. When the president said that, when President Obama said that, I have to admit, I cringed. I'm still cringing. I mean, how did that president ever think that? In the midst of the global war on terror. I mean, it was like, seriously? He honestly believes that a cloud's going to kill us? It's ridiculous. You're listening to the Wells Report. Thanks very much for doing so. 844-927-6691 will get you through, and we would love to hear from you. 844-927-6691. The Wells Report continues in a moment on the USA Radio Network.
All right, sir. I'm just editing some during the break, so just holler if you need me, and you got about 3.5 minutes.
Hey, I wonder, hang on a minute. Apparently we were broadcasting from an pain. I said, okay. Yes, sir. What? I don't know. Somebody's one of our guys is working with it. This probably, and they didn't bother telling us. Yeah. Well, I didn't realize that it was there. My adoring audience. Well, yes, a little person. I'm so glad. House rocking is so much fun. Oof. Oof. You know, I was at drill. You do know that, correct? Yes, I was. No, there I'm working as hard as I possibly can.
All right, back in 15 seconds.
So there you go. Gotta go.
All right, here we go, man.
Gotta go. Call back later. You are listening to the Wells Report. John David Wells at your service. Telephone number is 844-927-6691. 844-927-6691. What were you doing? What were you doing for a living when you were 31 years of age? Phil, what were you doing when you were 31? What were you doing for a living? You were in radio at age 31? You were what? Board hopping? You were being a technical producer, stuff like that there, producing? Let's see, when I was 31 years old, I had, let's see, that would have been 1981. And let's see, what was I doing in 1981? I was just finishing up working for ABC. I had 3 kids, and I was getting ready to move to Atlanta. So there. There's a guy out there who may be on the fast track to success. Okay? He is Austria's new chancellor. Yeah. A coalition between the anti-immigration Austrian People's Party and the anti-establishment Austrian Freedom Party, which will be sworn into office December 18th. I guess they've already been sworn into office. It happened yesterday. Is poised to catapult Austria into the vanguard of the Western Europe's resistance to mass migration from the Muslim world. The massive demographic and religious shift underway in Austria, traditionally a Roman Catholic country, appears irreversible. Austria has also emerged as a major base for radical Islam. We have a lot in common with Israel. I always say if one defines the Judeo-Christian West, then Israel represents a kind of border. If Israel falls, Europe falls. If Europe falls, Israel falls. Heinz Christian Strache, leader of the Austrian Freedom Party. They wanted to put together a coalition to govern Austria for the next 5 years. It is a groundbreaking political alliance and poised to catapult Austria into the vanguard of Western Europe's resistance to mass migration from Muslim countries. Sebastian Kurz is the chancellor. He is 31 years old. He won Austria's national election on October 15th, campaigning on a promise to halt illegal immigration. He's going to govern with Heinz Christian Strache, 48 years old, the Freedom Party leader who has warned that mass migration is Islamizing Austria. Under the agreement, Strache will become vice chancellor. The Freedom Party will take control of the ministries of defense, interior, and foreign affairs. Kurz has been a strong critic of German Chancellor Angela Merkel's open-door migration policy, which has allowed more than 1 million mostly male migrants from Africa, Asia, and the Middle East to enter the country in the past 2 years. During his time as foreign minister, Kurz was instrumental in garnering parliamentary approval of groundbreaking new laws that regulate the integration of immigrants. The integration law, which bans full-face Muslim veils in public spaces, prohibits Islamic radicals from distributing the Quran, establishes clear rules and responsibilities for the recognized asylum seekers and refugees granted legal residence in the country. The new law requires immigrants from non-EU countries to sign an integration contract, which obligates them to learn written and spoken German and to enroll in courses about the basic values of Austria's legal and social order. Immigrants are also required to acquire knowledge of the democratic order and the basic principles derived from it. Is that something we should do in America? 844-927-6691. Is that something we should do with the Muslim immigrants coming to the United States? Should they sign a contract like that? Does this seem to be overly racist or jingoistically xenophobic to you? It doesn't seem odd to me. It seems relatively okay. This seems to be okay. Previously, Kurz was instrumental, like I said, in reforming Austria's century-old Islam law, Islam Gazettes, the governing the status of Muslims in the country. The new law, passed February 2015, is aimed at integrating Muslims and fighting Islamic radicalism by promoting an Islam with Austrian character. It also stresses that Austrian law must take precedence over Islamic Sharia law for Muslims living in the country. The Muslim population in Austria is now 700,000, or 8% of the total population. That's up from an estimated 340,000, or 4.25%. That in 2001, 150,000, or 2% in 1990. The massive demographic and religious shift underway in Austria, traditionally a Roman Catholic country, appears irreversible. In Vienna, where Muslim population now exceeds 12.5%, Muslim students already outnumber Catholic students in middle and secondary schools. Muslim students are also on the verge of overtaking Catholics in Viennese elementary schools. At the same time, Austria has emerged as a major base for radical Islam. Austria's Agency for State Protection and Counterterrorism has warned of the exploding radicalization of the Salafist scene in Austria. Salafism is an anti-Western ideology that seeks to impose Islamic Sharia law. The immigration scene in recent years is changing our country not in a positive, but a negative way, said Kurz, who campaigned on a law and order platform. Uncontrolled immigration destroys the order in a country. Do you agree? 844-927-6691. Straka is a supporter of Israel who has distanced himself from the party rhetoric of the Austrian far right. He insists that anti-Semitism has no place in his party and has urged a common front against Islamists. Sorry, I keep having to bring this up. The Austrian far right is not against Israel. It's the Austrian far left. But what they are doing is they are masking themselves theoretically as conservatism when everybody knows that Nazis were socialist leftists. Hello?
What do you say, sir?
I was, no.
Oh, I thought you were saying hello.
No. Mike, the technical producer in Phoenix was going, what? I was just saying hello, Mike. Just,
I thought I missed something.
no, you didn't miss anything. I was just talking about Austria and so on, about how the countries of Europe are finding themselves in a position where unfettered Muslim immigration is destroying their culture, or maybe not destroying it, but changing it to a Muslim culture. I mean, this is the choice that these countries have to make. These countries have to decide whether or not they want to be Muslim countries. I mean, does Germany need to be a Muslim country? Angela Merkel thinks so. Do we really need Sweden? Or can it be a Muslim country too? I mean, what we're seeing here is we are seeing This is a calculated event. This is the return of the Ottoman Empire. And for the same reasons. The Arab Spring, bringing complete unrest to Arab countries all around the Mediterranean, bloody, relentless warfare, refugees flooding out of Syria, headed directly to Europe. Not families, single men. And so what they're trying to decide is whether or not they want to remain Austria or do they want to become Austriabad? Austriabad. Is that what they want to do? I was listening to people talking about the Swedish. Sweden is immersed in Muslim takeovers, basically. And the people who are the power elite in Sweden just continue to move away. They continue to move away from the places where Islam is taking over the country. And so what happens is this, they're essentially disconnecting themselves from their own country and watching their country being taken over. That is happening elsewhere in Europe. Another very famous Roman Catholic country in Europe is France. Is France eventually going to be a Muslim country too? This has been warned in Europe for years. Especially in England. And there are problems all over Europe based on this. Now, the same problems with the press and the left in the United States occur in Europe. And the simple stories of immigrants losing their mind and doing horrific, unspeakable things to people that don't measure up to their particular lifestyle, I'm talking about the immigrants, are simply going unreported. Bad news. Should European countries continue to allow unfettered Muslim immigration, or should they start taking steps to protect their cultures? Are we going to have to start making those kind of decisions sometime in the future? Or have we already done it? Finally, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled pretty much definitively that President Trump had the ability to close down the borders to people from terrorist Muslim countries. Finally. Scott asks on the chat room, he asks, how do you protect your culture? Well, you teach your history. You do. You teach your history. This could be a problem in France. But the verite of the Cinquième République. Anyway, that is, it's been referred to in the past by various writers as the national analgesic. I got it. But they're going to have to start standing up for things that are uniquely theirs. Give you an example in Germany. Germany, what does it mean to you? Well, one of the great exports out of Germany is beer. That is, however, the product of fermented grain or grape, which is not anything that Muslims care to have anything to do with. So if that is the case, then at some point there's going to be a cultural issue there. And like I said, Angela Merkel just doesn't care. So you teach your history. You celebrate nationalist things, and you do not listen to people who equate national support, pride in nation, as being some kind of racist endeavor. And you don't have to go to Europe to find that. Sarah Silverman, liberal comedian, America critic. Some people would say anti-American completely, like me. She is, however, incredibly funny. She's incredibly intelligent, but really doesn't like America. These are the people that will say, when somebody says, I love America, Merca, we're immediately referred to as being racist rednecks. No, we're proud Americans. We have a lot to be proud of in this country. And those are the things that Germans and Austrians, Swedes, the French, the Dutch, the English, the Irish, the Germans, all of these people need to stand up for. I don't think there's anything wrong with people being Muslim in your country as long as they realize that they are Muslim in your country. I mean, if you're going to live someplace, enjoy it. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Enjoy the life. Enjoy the life of Germany. I'm just saying. But trying to take over the country, that looks a lot like revolution. It looks a lot like an invasion. And that looks a lot like a bad idea to me. You're listening to the Wells Reports. This is the USA Radio Network.
All right, sir.
Was that boring? Was that inside baseball? Was that like,
Oh, no.
who cares?
I've actually heard of that guy before.
You have?
I read something about, the Austrian guy. I have read about him somewhere before. And how he was how he got elected on the not anti-immigration, but scaling it back.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sound like they're probably tired of the way Merkel is doing everything over there. They want different results.
Doodly-doo. Ba-doodly-doo. All right.
You got a minute 20, man.
Minute 20, man. It was December 12th. Good. Okie dokie. And then just like that, my picture got all fuzzy
Your picture.
on the YouTube thing.
Oh,
Why does my picture look all funny?
we gotta get some back to work on that website stuff, man.
Yeah, there's a lot to do. We sort of got to Christmas and went,
Yeah.
we got work to do.
We'll hit the ground running after this holiday. All right, here we go, man.
I'm ready, man.
5 seconds.
Yep. You're listening to the Wells Report. John David Wells at your service, 844-927-6691. The Trump administration is trying to end chain migration. This is something that's a leftist move that I guess I understand it to a point. You know, somebody comes to the country, okay, and you say, "Hey, great to be here. Thanks for bringing your talents," and so on and so forth. And you say, "Well, I'd like to bring my fiance. Can I get a visa?" Yes. I'd like to bring my parents. Okay. And it seems to me that makes some sense if, say, for example, you go through immigration through normal terms, normal by the normal process. In other words, you petition, you get a lawyer, you do all the things necessary, you get a temporary visa, you come to the United States, you go to classes, you work on your United States citizenship. You do all that. And then you get your background checked, and people will spend, whatever time necessary to be able to make sure that you're okay. And if you are somebody along that line, if you're somebody along that line and you want to bring your girlfriend in, I don't think that's a problem because we know you. But these people that come from Bangladesh or Yemen or Somalia or any of these places that got their visa thanks to, a lottery? Are you serious? There's a lottery out there. It's the Big Win America lottery. It's got this big poster that has Uncle Sam up there going, "I know you want me." So what ends up happening is you go, what do you pay, $2? It's a scratch off, right? You get a little form from the American Embassy, you scratch it off, and if there's a visa underneath that, you just dip it in water, you put it on your passport, and you come to the United States. Is that the way it is? Okay. If that's the way that works, actually, I guess that wouldn't work in Bangladesh. You'd have to, what is it? It'd be 5 AK-47 rounds. You put down 5 AK-47 rounds, you get a scratch off ticket. So anyway, if you get one of those visas, you don't get to bring your girlfriend and your parents and your brothers and your aunts and your uncles and your cousins and your chain and your strain of champion beagles. You don't get to bring those people to this new country. They have to figure out a way to get here themselves. I'm just saying. The White House says that chain migration is the process by which foreign nationals permanently resettle in the U.S. and then bring over foreign relatives who then have the opportunity to bring over their foreign relatives until the entire extended family are resettled in the country. What that means in practice is that the admission of a single migrant, including through the controversial diversity visa lottery, which admits immigrants from countries otherwise underrepresented in immigration patterns, seriously, can lead to an inflow of other immigrants who are part of the first person's extended family. Yeah, it's time to create, I agree with President Trump. Let's create a merit-based immigration system. What do you think about that? In other words, let's create a system of immigration where you have to be talented. Why don't we get the all-stars from every other country on earth to come to the United States? Let's bring their families in. What's wrong with that? In other words, merit-based. You want to come to the United States? Prove that you're worth having in the United States. I know that may sound a little elitist, but it's not as bad as anything that Hillary Clinton would say about me. You're listening to the Wells Report. This is the USA Radio Network.
All right, sir. Wrapping up hour 2 there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, buddy.
Flying by today.
It is flying by just a little bit then. Doodly-doo, doodly-doo, doodoo, doodly-doo, doodly-doo, doodoo, doodly-doo.
All right, man. I'm going to run to the restroom. I'll be back in a
Run to the restroom, then.
All right.
You think that's what it is, JC Fab? Arletta Jordan. Let's see. House likely to redo what? But last minute glitch delays, final passage. What? Oh, man. That's annoying. This just in.
Back in 2 minutes.
2 freaking minutes. Oh. Ah.
Hey, man.
Hey, man.
The Logan guy is calling and wants to know if you're going to continue talking about the immigrants or
Why? Does he want to say something?
I don't know. Let me see. Yeah, he said he did. He said he wants to. If you're going to talk about it still.
Okay, just tell him to talk about the. I know he likes the show, and it's very nice, and he's always been very effusive of me and so on, and that's also very nice.
Okay.
But just tell him to talk about. Just tell him to talk about what we're talking about there. Talk about chain migration, et cetera. You wanted to talk about chain migration?
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
All right, we're back in 30 seconds. I'll put him in info in there.
Okay. North to south, coast to coast, this is the Wells Report. John David Wells at your service, 844-927-6691. Truth in the news is what we do. Give you the news. We give you the facts. I comment on the facts. We debate the commentary. It's interactive news. Welcome to the broadcast. Speaking of welcoming someone to the broadcast, let's go to Logan. Logan, thanks very much for joining us from Dallas. Welcome to the Wells Report.
Yes, sir, and thank you for having me on. I love your show. Just really quick, we're talking about bringing in people, immigrants and what have you, that have no value to America and et cetera, et cetera. And I will tell you from the IT point of view, I work in the IT field as a contractor. And I'll tell you what, there's an H-1 visa situation that's been going on for years. What that means is they bring in guys from all different countries and who don't necessarily even know the language very well, but they'll bring them in to do IT support. They'll train them a little bit, and they make half of what I make. So it's been undercutting the IT field for a long time. That's all I wanted to say about it.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I think you're talking about that H-1B visa that has been it's been kind of it's been a boon to IT companies who are able to bring people in for a lot less money. And the thing about that is that too many of us, that's that's really pathologically anti-American. Why would you do that? You know, it's one thing to be able to come up with a great idea. One thing to come up with a superb plan. You know, like, for example, let's talk about Henry Ford. I've used this example on this broadcast before. If this seems tedious that I'm bringing it back up, well, just bear with me. But Henry Ford wanted to build cars for everybody. And he wanted to build good quality cars that worked and lasted. But he also, part of his business plan was to build them inexpensively enough so that the people that worked for him could buy a car. In other words, if you worked for Henry Ford, if you worked for the Ford Motor Company, he built a car you could afford to buy. And he'd help you buy it. Did a whole bunch of things. Forced frugality into the design of the car. I mean, there were lots of cars. I mean, cars were being made everywhere, but none were being made for the middle class or for what was the middle class in the United States then. Nobody was doing that. And that was part of his business plan. If you're running a corporation whose business plan is to suck every possible nickel out of every possible transaction that you make with any other possible corporation or your customers or what have you, you're not going to last. But these companies are not necessarily built for that. Remember, these companies are built for the convenience of, say, for example, a big money guy who wants to become a bigger money guy that hooks onto some people with some great ideas. He builds a corporation around those great ideas. He pays those people reasonably. But in the meantime, what he does is he takes stock payouts. They go out and they do an IPO. People say, "My goodness gracious, that is a great idea." They do these IPOs, and these guys go from being reasonably wealthy to unbelievably wealthy overnight. And so then what ends up happening is they essentially take their money, they wait until the IPO expires or what have you, then they cash out their stock and leave. The company succeeds for a while, then flounders and dies. Hobby Lobby, perfect example. That entire exercise was not about creating a hobby store for people to go and buy hobby goods from. That was about building a company that a family could make a lot of money on and then head off to take care of their bucket list. This is contrasted with somebody like, say, for example, Walmart. Walmart's in it for the long haul. Walmart earned their spurs by saying we were made in America when nothing was made in America. People came to Walmart in droves. Walmart sold and sold and sold and sold and became the biggest retailer in world history. Now it seems like Amazon is going to roll over the top of Walmart, because I got to tell you, there are an awful lot of parcels that make it to my house. There are an awful lot of parcels making it to my house from Amazon and wherever else. I don't have to get in my car. I don't have to go to a store. I don't have to pay extra prices. And indeed, retailers are feeling the strain. Macy's, Sears, Kmart. You know, there's no real excuse for Sears. They had the Amazon model. They had arguably the Amazon model, certainly, and perhaps e-commerce 100 years ago. They put out a catalog. They sent you the product that you bought from the catalog, and most of it was really, really good. Some of it not, but most of it was good. And they just got left behind. It's like they were looking completely the wrong direction when Amazon showed up. By the way, I forgot to tell you this. Did you see this in the news? The House earlier today passed the most significant overhaul of the tax code in 3 decades. There was much backslapping. Everyone was laughing. Everybody's going, this was great. We're going to be able to have this wonderful postcard, which, by the way, is getting slightly bigger every time I see it. That we'll all be able to sit down at our kitchen counter with a calculator, be able to do our taxes, and it'll be easy and it'll be simple. And they made a mistake in the bill today, and they're going to have to do it over again. The Senate parliamentarian found out that 3 provisions in the GOP House bill did not comply with strict provisions and the budget rules of the Senate, and they will have to be stripped out. So that means the Senate, they're going to strip those provisions out. The Senate is going to vote on it tonight, probably pass it. Then the House will get a chance to vote on it again tomorrow. Now, what I'm trying to figure out is what are the things that they have to take out, right? That's what I'm interested in. Nobody's talking about that. Nobody's talking about what they actually have to take out. Let's see. Revision added a provision. Wait, hold on. The bill will be an anchor around the ankles of every American, said Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. Thank you, Mr. Happy. We appreciate all that. Thank you. I'm trying to figure out what are the pieces. Can you try to find out what the pieces are that they got to strip out? What are the 3 provisions that the Senate will not be able to handle? So they got to strip those out. The Senate will vote on it. They will pass it, and then they'll send it back to the House of Representatives without those 3 provisions. And what I'm trying to figure out is what are the provisions? There wasn't a whole lot of wheeling and dealing going on in the House of Representatives, not that we heard about. There were a lot of wheeling and dealing going on with like Marco Rubio and a couple of other senators. Let's see. Yeah. The Republicans added a provision that took out the individual mandate, but that's not one of the things that might be up for grabs here. So we don't know exactly what it is, but the Philip Brown is working on it, our executive producer. He's going to find out what that is. So anyway, they're going to vote on the bill again, yes, tomorrow. So we talked about it today, and they passed it today, and the Senate is going to pass it today, and then the House is going to pass it again tomorrow, and then the president will be able to go out and say, see, we did it again, theoretically, give or take. 844-927-6691 is our telephone number. 844-927-6691. Join us. We saw this today, and this seems to be the day for grains of salt in our broadcast, in our broadcasting today. We've come up with a couple of things that we wanted you to be aware of, but seemed a bit too partisan. You know, I'm just saying they're just a little bit of partisanship. What was the first thing that we talked about today that you had to put a certain level of grains of salt on? What were we talking about? It was, hang on a second here. I got it right here. Oh, Hillary's so-called money laundering. You know, that thing we said, you got to put some grains of salt on this. I've got another one of those stories. Actually, I've got 2 versions of the stories because that's what it takes. They say they call themselves a nonpartisan ethics watchdog, but the Foundation for Accountability and Civic Trust, in everything that we can find out, they say that they are conservative. Okay, so the reason that I picked up this article is because it said a nonpartisan ethics watchdog, and I kept reading it. And I happen to notice that everybody that they are calling out for ethics violations are Democrats. So I asked the Philip Brown, I said, Phil, would you run a check on the Foundation for the Accountability and Civic Trust, FACT for short? And he did. And he said, that's pretty much a conservative watchdog group. So keep this in mind. So they say they're nonpartisan. You know, I say this radio broadcast is nonpartisan, but not necessarily. Does anybody else agree? But I can point to things that make it constitutional as opposed to conservative, but I am a conservative, so it gets lost in the shuffle, what have you. A nonpartisan ethics watchdog is named Democrat Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz as one of its top 5 ethics violators of the year. The Foundation for Accountability and Civic Trust named Schultz as the second worst violator for 2017 for continued employment of Imran Awan, a House IT aide, after he was accused of stealing computers and data systems in February. Schultz finally fired Awan on July 25th when he was arrested at Dulles International Airport on bank fraud charges while trying to flee to Pakistan. Awan was indicted in August. FACT called for an ethics investigation into Schultz in July. All right. So Wasserman failed to remove Awan from the House payroll, compensated him with taxpayer funds for several months, even though he was barred from the House of Representatives in the computer system, which would have prevented him from performing any reasonable IT work. In fact, Wasserman Schultz only fired Awan after he was arrested on bank fraud charges. She's in clear violation of the House ethics rules, says FACT. There are others, and you'll get to hear about those too. Ethics Watchdog comes up with the top 5 ethics violators in the United States. You've heard about number 2. Number 1 is next. You're listening to the Wells Report on the USA Radio Network. Back in a minute.
All right, sir.
Well, hello. Thank you. 3 components of the bill. A provision expanding the use of 529 savings account for K-12 expense.
You did pretty good on that.
What?
About the House having to revote because it just now came up on our little news feed.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I jumped all over it. I did. Hey, man.
Yeah.
Great work. Okay, then. Somebody came up with a really cool. Oh, wait, hang on a second here. Okay, good. Somebody came up with a really cool. Please disregard the last transmission. Did you hear me say that, JF? Or do you say that to JC? Because I say that. Please disregard the previous transmission. No, let's see. It's let me read it to you. It's the 529 provision that expanded the use of savings accounts for K through 12 expenses. A provision regarding the title of the bill and part of the criteria for whether universities are subject to an excise tax that the bill imposes on investment income. Yeah, you are correct, Red Cap. It was the expansion was proposed by Senator Ted Cruz. That was funny that you're talking about a 60s show because I was just thinking about You Bet Your Life. Not because of oh, what's his name? Groucho Marx. Yeah, because of Howard Fenneman. You know who he was? He was Groucho Marx's assistant on the broadcast, who actually knew everything was going on in the show. Basically was a herder. He was a Groucho herder.
All right, back in 20 seconds.
All righty.
All right, here we go.
You are listening to the Wells Report. I am John David Wells. The Philip Brown has come up with the 3 provisions that will require that the House of Representatives re-vote on the tax bill that they voted on today. The Senate parliamentarian rejected the 529 provision, which, by the way, it's a savings plan. 529 plans, the Ted Cruz put this up. The final version of the bill included a provision to expand the benefits of 529 savings plans to include tax-free distributions to pay for K through 12 expenses. Currently, 529 plans offer tax-free earnings growth and tax-free withdrawals when funds are used to pay for college. Okay? So that's the issue there. The other one, there were a couple of other ones that seemed to be incredibly minor. A provision regarding the title of the bill and a part of the criteria for whether universities are subject to an excise tax the bill imposes on investment income. Those are small things. They're small things, but they are going to cause the bill to be revoted on in the House of Representatives, and also the 529 expansion that Ted Cruz wants is going to have to come up in a different time in a different bill. All right? Okay, so there you go. Fact says that Deborah Wasserman Schultz is the number 2 ethics violator in the country this year because of this character that she had working for her, and that was a guy named Imran Awan, the House IT guy that got thrown out of the House, couldn't use the computer system, couldn't do any of that stuff. Anyway, got arrested for bank fraud. Whoops. So anyway, Schultz kept standing by her guy and kept paying him and so on and so on, and it was a violation of the House ethics rules. Members are directly responsible for ensuring that their staffs are only paid for official public work. Okay. The top ethics offenders of 2017, according to FACT, were the unknown members of Congress who settled sexual harassment cases with taxpayer funds. In case you're wondering, that's a lot of money. It's like $700,000 now. They spent a lot of money on this. Others on the list include Representative John Lewis for employing his chief of staff as his campaign treasurer, and Representative Alcee Hastings for what FACT called overcompensating his girlfriend with taxpayer funds. Yeah. Apparently, Hastings was paying Patricia Williams, his longtime girlfriend, who was serving as his co-counsel during his impeachment trial as a federal judge in the 1980s, the maximum congressional salary of $168,411 to work as the deputy district director in his Broward County, Florida office. Ms. Williams collected the maximum congressional salary for 5 straight years and is the highest compensated individual on the federal payroll of Hastings. Williams, who paid more than Hastings' D.C. chief of staff, typically the highest paid position in the congressional office, has collected more than $2.4 million since the year 2000. So there you go. Oh, here it is right now. I'm sorry, it wasn't $700,000. That was too much. Oh, no, it was. Okay, sorry. This is confusing. Listen to this. More than $265,000 was paid out over the last decade by congressional offices of compliance to settle sexual harassment or sexual discrimination claims. This, according to Washington Times. Congressional leaders had pushed for a public accounting of the money. According to the Times, the money included 10 settlements from 2008 through November of 2017. Some of the payouts had been made public previously. However, the numbers from 2008 to 2012 were released today. In all, here it comes, $700,000 was paid out by the office to settle a variety of complaints against lawmakers for the last 10 years. About $342,000 was spent in the first 5 years. The remainder of from 2013 through this year. By the way, regarding the $700,000, none of the lawmakers involved in the settlements were named. Congress has been under increasing pressure to open up secret processes they use to deal with sexual harassment. And they probably should, especially to the tune of $700,000. Who spent that money? I'd really like to know, wouldn't you? You are listening to The Wells Report. 844-927-6691 gets you through to the USA Radio Network. Okay. Great frickin' job. What have I got here? No, I did not wear a two-wheeler today. No, I did not. I did not. Say the secret word and win a free, what did he give away? He gave $100. It's a lot of money back then. No, but I hope to at some point. I really want to go to Al Lam Honda and get I want to get a gold wing. That's what I want. Oh, here you go. A 2015 Honda CBR 1000 RR SP. That's a race bike, man. Want to go racing? Ooh. Got to get that for my friend. Let's see here. Got a lot of race bikes.
You know, Honda makes a chopper now.
Does it? They've always made one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they've always made one. Yeah, it's called the VT 1100. It's a cool bike, man. There's a VTX 1300C. It's a V2 four-stroker. Wait. Okay. Let's see. Let me see what I got here.
You got 1 minute, man.
1 minute, man. 1 minute, man. 1 minute, man. Okay. Buy American a Harley Davidson? No, thanks. No. Yes, remember I did fall in love with the bike. Yeah. What's my schedule for the rest of the week? I'm going to be working all the way through Friday, I think. I think we're going to be off. Wait a minute.
Back in 10 seconds.
Okay, hang on. You are listening to the Wells Report. John David Wells at your service. This is kind of funny. The EPA has always been kind of an offbeat organization. It started on Earth Day in 1970. Actually, it was, I guess it came to be in 1972. I think that was the first year of the EPA. And it started out as a way for the American government to come up with ways to keep the planet clean or keep the country clean. You know, they did Superfund, they did cleanups around the country. It actually was pretty good. And then what ended up happening was that it started becoming a political bludgeon. A political bludgeon that was, it was just basically a way to punish your political rivals. They would say, for example, that you were violating some sort of bizarre EPA regulation. And EPA regulations got further and further bizarre with these rules that they would come up, these regulatory rules that they would come up with that had the power of law, that did not have the actual sanction of representative government behind those laws. So in other words, it was an arbitrary agency basically doing whatever it wanted to with your money, your property, your this, your that. But then the EPA sort of fell on hard times as it became more and more and more virulent and more evil, and it started pounding on people until, let's see, they fined a couple in Wyoming for building a pond on their own property. They said that the ditch that had a small trickle of water in it that turned into this really beautiful pond was somehow destroying wetlands. Excuse me? So they started fining them. The fines got up to $38,000 before someone said, no, not so much. But that's what happened with the EPA. Now the EPA is basically part of the deep state, maybe the serious deep state. But now they have a guy who's running the EPA who is a solid conservative. His name is Scott Pruitt. Scott Pruitt is not somebody who you would say would be a leftist in any way, shape, or form. Consequently, the EPA has a problem with its leader. But listen to what he did today. He used public money, had his office swept for hidden listening devices. They bought sophisticated biometric locks for additional security. The spending items totaled nearly $9,000, were among a string of increased counter-surveillance precautions taken by the EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt. Now, Pruitt also requires around-the-clock protection by an armed security team. The EPA's Office of the Inspector General is investigating his $25,000 purchase of a custom-made soundproof privacy booth for his office. He is not interested in having his phone calls eavesdropped on. In accounting for Pruitt's spending on the bug sweep of the pricey locks was provided to the Associated Press by an EPA employee who's not happy about the fact that he suddenly can't listen at the boss's door. Yeah. EPA spokesperson Jehan Wilcox defended the spending. Ambassador Pruitt, or Administrator Pruitt, has received an unprecedented amount of threats against him, and while the Associated Press attempts to trivialize his safety, there is nothing nefarious about a security decision made by EPA's Protective Service detail. The EPA headquarters in Washington is a secure building with armed guards posted at the entrances with metal detectors, X-ray machines, etc. EPA paid $3,000 in April to Edwin Steinmetz Associates to conduct the bug sweep. The purchase of the biometric locks, which typically work by electronically scanning a person's fingerprint, was spread over two transactions of $3,390 and $2,495. Expenses under $3,500 are not typically listed on a federal contracting website that provides full public disclosure of government spending. So here's what he did. He bought a soundproof room, or the cone of silence. He bought himself, he had the office swept for bugs. He installed high-tech locks and this booth where he can have private conversations. Is he just a little paranoid? Maybe not so much. Listen to this from the Washington Free Beacon. EPA bureaucrats are running to the New York Times to complain about Administrator Scott Pruitt and how he doesn't want them to conspire against either him or President Donald Trump. Readers have to get to the 17th paragraph to realize just exactly what's going on. The article that they're talking about has the headline, EPA employees spoke out, then came scrutiny of their emails. This according to the Times. Implying that Pruitt himself is scouring over their emails. He's not. So let me give you this. Eric Lipton, Lisa Friedman. One Environmental Protection Agency employee spoke up at a private lunch held near the agency's headquarters, saying that she feared the nation might be headed towards an environmental catastrophe. Don't worry, little chicken little. The sky is not going to fall. Another staff member from Seattle sent a letter to Scott Pruitt, the EPA administrator, raising similar concerns about the direction of the agency. A third from Philadelphia went on to rally where he protested against agency labor or budget cuts. 3 different agency employees in different jobs from 3 different cities, but each encountered a similar outcome. Federal records show that within a matter of days, requests were submitted for copies of emails written by them and mentioned either Mr. Pruitt or President Trump, or any communication with the Democrats in Congress that might have been critical of the agency. So in other words, they complained, and then suddenly people started going through their emails. Really? Now a company affiliated with America Rising named Definers Public Affairs has been hired by the EPA to provide media monitoring in a move that the agency said was to keep better track of newspaper and video stories about the EPA operations nationwide. The sequence of the events, however, has created a wave of fear among employees, particularly those already subject to special scrutiny who said in official assurances really didn't have that much intention of putting them at ease. This is a witch hunt against EPA employees who are only trying to protect human health and the environment. Really? How are you protecting human health and the environment by fining a Wyoming married couple $35,000 or $38,700 for building a pond on their own land? So an EPA official is standing up going, you know what, this guy is protecting himself in ways that make it impossible for us to eavesdrop on at the door and to try to figure out what's going on. And so that he can run to his buddies at the New York Times or the Washington Post and make the new EPA administrator look like a fool. How dare he put up a soundproof booth in his office? Special locks that I can't get a key to. I mean, come on. I mean, I'm not getting paid. I mean, this is all just part of my job at the deep state. But it seems to me that if you're working at the EPA and you put out an email on an EPA administrative website, that's not your email. That's somebody else's email. And you know what? I'm thinking that maybe you could, maybe what you could do is you could just stop abusing your email privileges and just stick to business. That way you wouldn't have to worry about anything. Just saying. But I got a couple of questions. Do you think the EPA is going to survive the Trump administration? I'm not so sure. I don't think it should. I think the Environmental Protection Agency ought to stay around only to run one thing and one thing only. And that thing to run would be the Superfund cleanup. But the rest of it should be allowed for the states. The states can keep their own backyards clean. So I hope they have a wonderful time doing it. I truly do. Because I think the states can do just fine cleaning up their backyard, and I think that the EPA has been nothing more than a way for government opportunists and tyrants to practice oppression. Do you agree? 844-927-6691. Do I want a dirty planet? No. Do I want dirty politicians making dirty decisions about my neighbors? Even more no. Even more no. And as far as scrutiny of your emails, gosh, you know what? I hate to be a hard guy, but you know what? If you're working with a government email address, seriously, man, they get to look at that. Not only do they get to look at that, but the National Archives gets to look at it, because all that stuff belongs to them. Now, if you're the EPA, if you're working for the EPA, do you get to carry a smartphone, and do you get to carry? I don't know what the actual security issues are. I don't know what the security issues are, but I would assume that what they're doing is that they're not allowing people to have smartphones in the hallways of the EPA. But that being said, you're still in a situation where you got to use, if you're going to use the company equipment, you need to use it with the company in mind. And if you want to go out and have like an e-brake instead of a cigarette break or something like that. You want to go out and do a little bit of checking on your email or what have you. Okay, twice a shift, and you can do that. Yeah, the EPA was a great idea that did not really comport to anything that was close to what it was intended to do. See if I get to the 17th paragraph here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. I see. Yeah, Michael Cox, who worked at the EPA's Seattle regional office for 25 years, learned that from an article of the New York Times, he had been under the employees or one of the employees under scrutiny. He wrote to Mr. Pruitt, that's the EPA administrator, in March on the day of Mr. Cox's retirement from the agency to tell him he was increasingly alarmed about the direction of the EPA under your leadership. He needed to step back and listen to career EPA staff. 10 days later, a Freedom of Information request came in seeking Mr. Cox's correspondence. That was the scrutiny that they were talking about. Yeah, that's the way it works. Yeah, indeed. You want to start throwing food at each other in a government agency? All kinds of people start investigating at some point. And that's what happened this time. You're listening to the Wells Report. Back in a minute.
All right, sir.
Let's see. I have one radio that can get KBDT usually, but never after dark. Yeah, dark is we bring our signal down to protect KSL in Salt Lake City. And at least in Fort Worth, you can actually hear KSL in Salt Lake City, which is okay. It's my pet peeve that people who have radio stations on AM that have to bring their power down, the people that they're trying to protect, you can't hear their signal anyway. So why do we have to bring our signal down? But anyway, that's the way that works. Let's see. When does the government shut the Board of Education down? Well, the Board of Education, true. If you want to see anything screwed up, try to see if there's a federal agency around it. If there is, yeah, then it's screwed up. Let's see. Wow. I have a transistor radio I used when I rode the Ledbetter train because people wouldn't try to steal it. They were grabbing folks' cells. They didn't know what to think about a transistor radio. The radio signal is not the best. Besides, in Dallas, good thing is on YouTube Live. Well, thank you. Far northern Collin County. Let's see. The signal today is going to be staticky because of lightning. There's a lot of lightning in the air. There's a lot of electricity in the air, so it's going to affect the AM signal. So there's that. Let's see here. Yeah, Arletta Jordan is a guy, in case you guys don't know that. I'm just saying.
All right, start back in 20 seconds.
20 dang seconds. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. I had a crazy uncle. His name was Dave Hamill. He was my wife. He was my mother's brother. And I shared a lot with Uncle Dave. Uncle Dave was a very, very good race driver. He was very, very fast in the sports car craze of Southern California in the 60s. He drove a Porsche 356 that he owned and was very, very fast. So fast that Porsche gave him a car. Like a lot of guys who are gentleman racers, his wife at the time, my Aunt Sally, whom I adored, she hated me, but I loved her. She did not like the fact that my Uncle Dave was in love with his Porsches and exerted pressure for him to walk away from his racing career, something he never really forgave her for. But like the rest of that particular part of my family, they all came down with a very similar kind of lung cancer. It was, in the case of my mother, caught before it was actually catchable. I mean, it was before it was stage 1. In fact, the cancer did not kill my mother. It was the treatment that they put her on. When Uncle Dave was diagnosed with this cancer, he had stage 4 cancer. And they put him on chemotherapy, and his kidneys immediately shut down, and he dang near died. They got his kidneys going again, but they told him that he needed to essentially tend to his affairs, and they would keep him comfortable until the end. It was then that Carolyn, Uncle Dave's wife, his new wife, started working on trying to find a way to keep Uncle Dave alive. And she found these homeopathic remedies that indeed kept Uncle Dave alive for nearly 5 years. That he was being successful with these homeopathic medicines was not up for debate. They had the medical testing to prove it. So we got to keep Dave for an extra number of years thanks to these homeopathic medicines and the people who sell them. The Food and Drug Administration has announced a crackdown on what may be some of these very same people. The homeopathic drug market grew exponentially over the past decade into nearly a $3 billion industry. New plans announced yesterday place scrutiny on products aimed at children and infants, as well as those marketed for life-threatening ailments like heart disease and cancer. In recent years, we've seen a large uptick in products labeled as homeopathic that are being marketed for a wide array of diseases and conditions, from the common cold to cancer. I don't know whether Uncle Dave just was given a miracle or whether it was these homeopathic aids that kept him alive. All I can say is that they had written him off, and we got him for an extra 5 years. I hope the FDA is careful in their scrutiny of these homeopathic medicines, because there is at least a little bit of room anecdotally to say they actually work. We'll see. The executive producer of the Wells Report is the Philip Brown. Our studio coordinator is Mike Hawkins. My name is John David Wells. Have a wonderful evening. We'll see you again tomorrow for another edition of the Wells Reports from USA Radio Network.
All right, sir. Good show today.
Yeah, I think I hated the last half hour.
What?
The EPA. I think I just hated it. I don't know.
All right, man. Well, I'm sure. You weren't bad, man. It was fine.
All right, buddy. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, man. Well, have a good evening, man.
God bless all y'all.
All right, man. We'll see you back tomorrow.
All right. Take good care.
Have a good one.
Yep.
Bye.
God bless you too. God bless all y'all, and I will see you later.